My team and I profitably managed over $700,000 a month for a B2C regenerative medicine company. And today's video is going to be part 2 in the series here on the channel, encompassing all of the lessons that we learned in doing so. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Sebastian Robeck. I have worked as the previous CMO for Cole Gordon and Closers.io. I was also the head of marketing for an 8-figure-a-year regenerative medicine company, the same company I'm referencing in this video. And over the last few years, my team and I here at 7FM have been scaling high-ticket info businesses up from being stuck at a couple $100,000 a month to multiple 6 and 7 figures a month. And we do it by completely managing our clients' marketing departments for them and installing our conversion ecosystem. Now, without further ado, let's dive right into the video. So in part 1 of this series, so the previous video, it was all about marketing, ads, the ad account structures, and how we manage the spend. Today, I'm going to talk about the piece that very few people either have the knowledge on or care to talk about because, quite frankly, it's not as sexy as ads and funnels and managing ad accounts. However, this piece is arguably one of the most crucial components to scaling a company to 7 or 8 figures, which is how to actually work with sales teams at scale in the marketing function. Because at this scale, if marketing and sales are working together, then you will see lots of success inside the business. And if they are not working together, and if there's unnecessary tension or conflict that doesn't need to be there, things can quite easily fall apart. And I'm going to share real examples of how my team and I have managed this marketing and sales dynamic with millions of dollars on the line, because at scale with 7 and 8 figure businesses like the ones we've worked in, this absolutely can make or break the success of the business. And I'm also going to talk about what actually being on the same team, in quotes, truly means, because there's a sort of surface level definition of what people think it means for marketing and sales to work together, and then there's a deeper, more truthful version of what that looks like, and I'm going to explain what I mean. The one point I want to make here before I dive into the specific lessons is, as a founder, and this is what I have seen after being inside of literally dozens of high-ticket info businesses at this point, is that your 2 key hires, along with obviously all of your client delivery and fulfillment staff, your 2 key hires in scaling the business are going to be your head of marketing / CMO / your marketing team, right? So call it whatever you'd like, the whoever's at the head of the ship for marketing, and then the same thing for sales. Call it CSO, call it CRO. Names and titles are interchangeable, but the point is those heads of both departments are going to be absolutely vital for you. And the smartest founders that I have worked with are the ones that understand that it's really their job to put the best people in those positions and really just get out of their way and just make sure that they're working together really well. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean, so when I say hires, it doesn't mean you have to hire this sort of person internally. Of course you can, and you can try and build an internal marketing team. What a lot of our clients do is, on the marketing side, they hire us because we're sort of an external team that plugs into their business and really just operates as their full-scale marketing department. And then oftentimes our clients will also hire similar sorts of companies for sales, or they'll have an internal sales director already who's really, really good and really skilled. We do not take on any clients who don't have one of those 2 things in place already, because scaling the client acquisition for a high-ticket info business is a 2-way street. You need marketing and sales, and the dynamic between the 2 is so crucial. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the mistake that taught me everything. So this is actually from when I was working inside of Closers.io and I was Cole Gordon's CMO. In my early days there, I learned an incredibly, incredibly important lesson. And to give you a little bit more of a picture here on the scenario, so we were running ads. This was specifically for our B2B offer. Leads were flowing, numbers look good. Sales director comes to me and says, "Hey man, these leads are trash. We need better quality leads. What the fuck," basically, right? So my reaction, being a young, unseasoned CMO marketer, is to go into panic mode, which is what I did. Oh, fuck. Okay, we got to start changing everything, change the angles on the ads, change the targeting, rework this, change the headline on the funnel, just real like survival panic mode. And I ended up, as a result, we spent multiple 5 figures chasing quote unquote better leads. However, when we actually pulled when we pulled up the hood and looked underneath, we listened to over 15 sales calls to see what was actually happening. And it wasn't necessarily that the leads were the problem. It was a mix of the actual on-call sales process that the reps were running through and some changes that they made that were unnecessary, and sales ops. So this is also something that a lot of people don't talk about. But when scaling to these levels, 7-8 figures a year, sales ops becomes so freaking important. And as a marketer or a CMO or whoever, like as a founder, you need to make sure that your current marketing team understands sales ops and processes and how to interact with them on the sales side and interact with the sales directors with regards to sales ops. Because it's like, how do you manage all the leads? How do you manage the bookings? Do you have someone who's designated to calling and confirming existing qualified bookings, removing people off the calendar, keeping availability, ever flowing, all that stuff? It's just incredibly important. And what we also found was sales team was rushing their sales calls because the volume had increased. So they cut their call time slot down. And on the actual calls themselves, the way they were speaking, they were just going through their flows a lot faster. So they were skipping small but important steps on the qualification process purely just to handle more calls. So of course, close rate dropped, but it wasn't necessarily because the leads were trash. It was actually more of a sales process and an operations breakdown, not so much the lead quality. And the core lesson there is that, now, I want to put an asterisk on this. This is not always the case, and I just want to make that ultra clear. However, what I have found is, and this is from working alongside dozens of sales directors and CROs, is that the natural bias for sales teams, and especially heads of sales teams, is to blame marketing. Now, again, that's why I said asterisks. Not all the time, but more often than not, that is the tendency, is to blame the marketing, blame the lead quality, blame the funnel, blame the ads. Our job and what our team's primary focus is as the marketing sort of function is to not react. And this is a key mistake, again, as I just mentioned earlier, that I made several times in my early days at Closers. And I learned so much from it, because what I realized is that our job is actually to diagnose and to protect the bandwidth of the marketing department as well. Because if we just operate on the marketing side purely at the whims of the sales teams and the sales directors, we will be running around like chickens without our heads forever. And us running around like chickens without heads doesn't necessarily correlate to the results that the business requires to be at the levels that we all want it to be at. So those two things are not necessarily, and often are not, directly correlated, and usually they are inversely correlated. The more random stuff the marketing team does because the sales team said X, usually the less successful those individual actions are. So we really have to be objective and diagnose the situation, as opposed to just doing whatever the sales team thinks we should do on the marketing. And what we've also found is that sometimes a quote unquote marketing problem is actually a sales problem. But a sales problem, and this is also a key thing that the marketing needs to understand, is that a sales problem can mean multiple things. The same way a marketing problem can mean many things. Like, just to say that, there's a marketing issue. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we're spending way too much money on a shitty set of creatives that aren't performing? Does it mean that our funnel is speaking to the wrong person? It could be a whole slew of things. Same thing on the sales side. Just because it's a sales problem doesn't mean necessarily that the sales team sucks or that the closers are bad closers. It could be a process issue. It could be a random change that they made in their call flow. It could be, again, how the calendar is being managed. It could be a multitude of things. So you just have to understand that a quote-unquote marketing problem isn't necessarily always a marketing issue, and it could be more of a sales ops or process issue. And sometimes it could genuinely just be that the sales team needs to get better. That's also possible. And ultimately, data is going to tell the truth when emotions run high. So one note I want to hit on here, as I mentioned earlier, is what being on the same team with marketing and sales actually means. So And this literally comes just from direct experience of having done this so many times. So we took on a lot of clients in our early days where they had a sales manager or sales director in place, and we thought that being on the same team meant like having good, like friendly conversations and like sort of regular communication with the sales team, and that was all that was really needed to be on the same team. But here's what being on the same team actually means, and I compare this to sports, because if you look at the best sports teams, baseball, basketball, doesn't matter, what you're always going to see is that there is a ruthless commitment to truth on the teams and between the players specifically. And what that also means is, because there's a ruthless commitment to truth, there's also a ruthless commitment to and a willingness to have hard conversations and call out things that might feel uncomfortable to call out. And so that's actually what being on the same team means for a marketing and a sales department, is being willing to have the hard conversations, being willing to tell the objective truths, potentially call out things that one department head is seeing in another, but from a place of, again, seeking truth and not necessarily personal attacks. Because if it's personal attacks, that doesn't work, right? Same thing in sports. If we're just attacking people or attacking our teammates and shitting on them, that's not helping them get better. That's not helping the team and the mission and the cause. What we're trying to do is call things out in as much of an objective way as possible, but not be afraid to have those hard conversations. So I wanted to hit on that because as a founder, what you're looking for is you're looking to have your marketing function and your sales function be willing to have those hard conversations, and specifically the heads of those two departments. You want them to actually, sometimes you want them to be having conflict. You want them to be going head to head, but again, not in a personal attacky way, just in like a, let's get to the bottom of said issue for the sake of moving the business forward. So now I want to move through these few points here. So let's talk about the sales team diagnostic framework. So this is how to actually approach from the marketing side, how to approach certain issues when the sales teams bring them to you. For example, if the sales team says something like the leads are bad, which is probably the most common complaint that a sales team or sales director is going to bring, here's how we approach it. So number one, we check the lead quality metrics. So we always just start by looking at, are there any weird variances in things like booking rates, show rates, qualification rates, okay? So for example, if your booking rate is the same, there's a high likelihood that your lead quality is probably fine unless there has been some massive change in the targeting or something of the sort. One other thing to note here on lead quality, this is very important, something I learned very quickly working inside of closers, and also took this into our process for managing this B2C medical company, is that you can often have, especially on Facebook, you can often have a weird patch of 3 to 4 days where lead quality just takes a weird dive because Facebook is serving your ads to a weird pocket of traffic. And that's totally normal. And you just let it breathe for a couple days and your ads bounce back. Very, very, very normal. What I've seen often is a sales team will go, hey man, the leads are shit. And then the marketing thinks we need to suddenly change all the ads. And it's based off of 2 days of weird leads. Now, if it's 2 weeks, that's different. And that's more of a trend, not just an occurrence, in which case we will much more seriously consider making some sort of a change on the marketing side. But if it's just a couple days of lead volume being weird, lead quality being weird, don't freak out. Don't think you need to change everything. Let everything breathe for 24 to 48 hours, if not 72 hours, and just wait it out and see what happens. Step 2 is we also like analyzing by sales rep. So we'll look at individual performance versus team average. For example, if there's a new closer on the team, or if let's say half the sales team just got replaced by new closers, that's going to significantly impact things. So we really, anytime these complaints from the sales team are brought to us, we look at these individual sort of components of the entire machine. We also look at, again, new reps versus experienced ones, close rates by rep over time. And if, for example, if one sales rep in particular is crushing it, but the others aren't, then we know, okay, it might not actually be the lead quality. There might be more of a sales issue here because clearly one of the sales reps is doing really well. So it can't necessarily be just the leads. Step 3 is one of the most important parts, which is listening to actual sales calls. I know it sounds simple, but it's the simple stuff that drives the results, even at large scale levels like this. Sales call analysis is just one of the most fruitful activities that a marketing team, and obviously a sales team, of course, but definitely a marketing team can possibly perform. So we look for things like what objections are coming up. Are they qualified? So are people actually qualified based on our criteria? So we're listening to literally what people are saying on the calls. What are they doing for work? What's their lifestyle like? Maybe there's some financial qualification that takes place on the call. We're listening to what they're answering to those questions. How's the energy and engagement level? So we're looking at both how are the energy and engagement levels of the prospects and also of the reps, because that's also incredibly important. Because if you're listening to sales calls and, as marketers, we need to understand what a good sales call should sound and feel like in order to diagnose these things, not so that we can be the sales director, but so that we have the ability to accurately diagnose issues and then therefore make better decisions on the marketing side. So we do look out for things like, does the sales rep sound like he even gives a shit or she gives a shit about the person, about what they're selling, about why they're even here? Are they kind of just going through the motions? Are they very monotone? Things like that. So we're listening out for all this stuff. And then we're also looking for whether or not reps are following their established sales process. Are they literally just going off the rails and just doing something entirely different, or just winging it on calls? Well, that's a huge issue. And so then, if they're blaming the lead quality, yet meanwhile, they've completely thrown their established process that's been working for the last 6 months out the window, Well, there's really the issue, not that we have to go and change everything on the ads. Step 4 is we look at volume changes. So did lead volume just significantly take a spike? Did it just increase? Did it decrease significantly? Are reps having to handle more calls than usual? So sometimes what can happen is there can be a process breakdown if we're running more volume through the system than what the sales team is used to seeing come through. So maybe there's just a lot more leads slipping through the cracks. Maybe unqualified people are getting through, whatever the case may be. And then therefore to the sales team, it feels like it's a lead quality issue because they're overwhelmed. They're sort of inundated with a lot more volume. And then therefore they're a little bit scattered. And so again, it feels like a marketing issue, but it isn't necessarily one. Here are some other miscellaneous issues that you need to be looking out for. And this is what we looked out for, especially, and we had to basically keep a constant sort of scan for. Inside this B2C regenerative medicine company is things like team morale. So this is incredibly important. So occasionally we'll even sit in on a sales team meeting just to gauge the team morale, because if the sales director is coming and saying, well, yeah, guys, everything's all good on the sales team, but then you go and sit on a sales team meeting and, half the people are like not saying a word. People, you could just feel the energy is off. Like people don't even feel like they want to be there. People don't even seem to be genuinely invested in what we're doing emotionally, mentally, then you can just tell something's off. And team morale for sales has a huge impact on team performance. Another very, very common thing that came up is things like random new processes being rolled out. So sales director might go, hey man, so yeah, we just started having our setters call these leads and doing X, or we just stopped our setters doing this and instead our closers are doing this now, and blah, 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 whatever the new process is. But they didn't let us know on the marketing side. And then suddenly over the last week, since they rolled this new process out, X metric has changed, whatever it is. There's been some sort of variance in performance. And now they're trying to blame the marketing. Meanwhile, actually, there's been this new process that they've started doing or they've stopped doing that has a direct correlation and impact on overall performance. So again, we need to look out for these things. Huge one is, again, changes to capacity or availability. This is something we had to keep a constant finger on the pulse on, like almost daily, to be honest. Calendar availability, closer capacity. It could be as simple as a closer just got sick and is going to be out for a week, or has a random family emergency and is going to be out for the next few days. And therefore, the overall number of available slots drop down from, let's say, 80 for the week down to 60 or whatever it is. And that's going to directly impact, our ad spend and what we pace for that week and potentially the next 2 weeks. Lastly, reps not executing certain processes again. So this is actually very, very important. If on the marketing side, we would often build out certain processes for the sales team to execute on and follow, that would then help feed better tracking and data back to the marketing side that would allow us to make better, more informed decisions. It could be something as simple as moving your leads into a certain pipeline stage that marks them as, say, showed up, or marks them as qualified after their call with a closer, or whatever it is, to then feed a tag back into Hyros that allows us to better optimize our campaigns at the ad level based on higher quality leads, something to that sort. That's just one example of several. However, if the sales team doesn't actually execute that process and then a month goes by and you find out that they never did the thing you asked them to do, that feeds you back that better quality data, well, shit, there's an issue. So that could easily mess things up. And again, these are all the things you got to look out for. And these are all the things we look out for all of our clients. So let's talk about the next key pillar here, which is how to actually extract marketing gold from sales conversations. So at a high level, again, you need to be listening to sales calls. This is one of the activities that we put a ton of energy into just because it yields so much results and return. It's unsexy. It's not flashy as writing a new ad or whatever it is on the marketing side. But this activity is what allows all of those things to happen at a much higher performing level. So the process we followed is very simple. We would listen to 5 to 10 sales calls every week, and we would listen to a mix of wins and losses, because you don't just want to listen to sales calls that converted. You're also going to find a lot of gold, and sometimes more gold, in the calls that didn't convert. We would then take notes on exact language that prospects would use. We've optimized this process even in the last 4 to 5 months, where AI is doing a lot more of the heavy lifting for us. However, there is still an element where we are listening to sales calls ourselves, because there's certain things we're going to pick up on that AI just won't necessarily. We're also tracking objection patterns and how often they're coming up, and we're identifying what prospects mention about finding the company. So this is a very important one here, because sometimes a prospect on the call might say, yeah, I looked you guys up on Google And I only saw, like one tab on your home website. It made me a little bit skeptical. I'm not sure if, that's on purpose or what, blah, blah, blah. And so that's an important detail. And if that's something that consistently comes up on calls, we're going to feed that back to our marketing team and go, hey guys, we need to beef up our website. It needs to look more professional, it needs to be more, customer friendly, whatever the case may be. So we're directly feeding these things back. So the sorts of things we're listening for are language and phrases that they're using. So how are prospects actually describing their problem, and what words are they using versus what we are using currently in our ads? And this is incredibly important for the reasons I've talked about in other videos. But at the core, oftentimes what I see is founders are running ads, and even their internal marketing teams are running ads based off what they think the market is saying or feeling or thinking or even wants, not what they're actually saying. And you're going to find out what they're actually saying on sales calls. You also want to look for what gets them excited versus what makes them hesitate. So what I mean by this is when a sales rep is describing the offer or the process or whatever, look for the little moments where someone gets visually or look for the moments where somebody gets visibly lit up or visibly leans in a little bit, sort of emotionally or energetically. And you also want to look at what makes them hesitate, what makes them close up, what makes them give a one-word response. Listen and look for those things. And ultimately, we feed this language directly back into the ad copy and creative. Now, one note I want to make here. It's very easy to listen to sales calls and go, no, there's no way an ad is going to do well if we say exactly what they said on the sales call, because our brains, and especially marketing teams' minds, are so conditioned to think in marketing lens mode, which is like, how do we write something that sounds like good marketing that a marketer would look at and say, this looks good, versus what's actually going to resonate with the market, because those are two totally different things oftentimes. And so if someone on a sales call is saying, yeah, honestly, if it's like, let's say if it's a parent, I cannot get my kid to do X, Y, and Z no matter what, or whatever it is. Like, again, pick your problem that your market has, but listen to the way they're describing it on the sales call. Use that exact sentence. Hey, if you're struggling with getting your kid to do X, Y, and Z when you're trying to go to blah, 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 whatever it is, use the specific details, because if multiple people are saying it, then that means it's a common theme amongst your market, and make an ad that says exactly that. And not only will your ads perform a lot better, but your sales team will be much happier because they're going to be getting more and more leads that are actually the right types of people that they want to be speaking to. So we're looking at objection patterns. So things like, what are the top 3 objections coming through every week? Are objections changing over time? Because that's something we want to look at and obviously use on the marketing. Which objections are deal breakers versus just sort of surface level concerns? Because that's important as well. And then ultimately, the way we feed this back is we then create content that addresses objections before the call. And this is typically in the form of content retargeting that we run on Facebook. It's also in the form of pre-call content that we send to people before they have their sales call with a closer. And that's one of the most powerful places to insert this type of content, because someone's already taking an action with you in booking a call. They're already somewhat interested. They just need that content and that nurture to drive them over the line before they have their phone call. We're also looking at qualification gaps. So are unqualified people getting through? Is there an issue with how we're feeding data back to our pixel based off of application answers? Because that can actually have a huge impact. Is there some weird redirect in one of our 7 or 8 different application forms from all of our different traffic sources that's still redirecting unqualified leads to a calendar? Okay, if so, boom, we need to fix that ASAP. Are we asking the right questions in the funnel? Do we need to potentially change the flow of the questions, remove questions, add questions in? Something we might ask ourselves is, can we better filter out these people without necessarily cutting our volume by 30-40%? The feedback loop that we have with sales directors is minimum weekly meeting with all the sales directors, where we're looking at numbers, projections, pacings, and of course all the qualitative feedback that I just mentioned. Monthly all hands with the entire sales team. So this is where we're meeting with all the closers, all the setters, where we can just extract even more gold and insights, because again, the dynamic between the sales and the marketing needs to be symbiotic, in that we're always looking for as much feedback as possible. It doesn't necessarily mean we're always going to take every single bit of feedback and act on all of it, because we're going to run it through our filter, of course, to determine what's the most important to act on, but we need as much feedback as possible to make those decisions. We're also just doing regular deep dives on messaging and positioning, so we're always keeping a finger on the pulse on what kinds of people are showing up on calls, what are they saying, and how well are we feeding back what they're saying on the marketing, and how well are we speaking to that person. And of course, everything has to be data driven as much as humanly possible. Again, we are human, so we make mistakes, but as often as possible, it needs to be data driven, not emotional driven. Next up, I want to talk about managing the sales director relationship. So again, this is huge. So the reality for lots of sales directors is that oftentimes they are under massive pressure to hit numbers, and I recognize that, and our team recognizes that. And so we do have an element of compassion and understanding. Now, at the same time, what I have found is a lot of sales directors don't fully understand all of the different marketing metrics in the way that we do, which is not necessarily an issue, but it's just something I am aware of. Next up, they tend, not always, but tend to blame external factors and things like the marketing or the ads when things go wrong. When performance is not exactly where they want it to be, there tends to be a blaming of outside forces. However, at the same time, the sales director, the CRO, whatever you want to call them, they are going to have the most valuable insights for the marketing teams. And so they have the insights that we literally need in order to create the best marketing possible. So the relationship is a really delicate one in that we have to be able to have hard conversations, but also understand that there is some immense value in having a strong symbiotic relationship with the sales director or CRO. So here's how I built a lot of trust with both the sales directors inside the B2C regenerative medicine company that I've mentioned, but also, inside all the companies that we worked with. So number one, speaking their language. So sales directors don't give a shit about CPM and CTR and unique outbound click costs and all that shit. They don't care about that. They care about cost per qualified lead, show rates and close rates, and revenue and cash. At the end of the day, that's their bias. Ultimately, what we want to do is show how the marketing metrics connect to sales outcomes. And that's huge because if all we do is talk about in the weeds marketing stuff and don't show how it directly correlates to sales, they don't give a shit. So we always tie it back to revenue and profit. Number two is proactive communication. So we send weekly performance reports to the sales team. We flag potential issues before they become problems. We explain why we're making changes before we make them. This is huge. So we don't just operate in a vacuum, especially at a large scale level like this. So we don't just do random stuff and not tell the sales team about it. And it's not because we're necessarily asking the sales team for permission, because that's not what we're doing. We're just keeping them in the loop so they're aware. Lastly, we never surprise them with major shifts. So we're not going to drop the daily budget by 15% out of nowhere and not tell them and not give them time to prep for that. Number three is we include them in decision making. Again, it has to be a collaborative relationship and every decision has to be collaborative to some degree. So for example, if it's like, hey, we're seeing cost per lead increase by 20%. Here are our options. Here's our preference. What are you guys seeing? Let's make it work together. If it's, for example, lead volume is up 40%, can your team handle it? That has to be part of the equation before we just scaling the spend or keep spend where it's at. If we've been able to drop costs and increase volume, we have to obviously check to see if there's sales capacity for it. Ultimately, we want to make them feel like partners, not victims of our decisions. So we don't want the sales team to just feel like they're taking the brunt of whatever the marketing team decides to do on a random day. And this goes both ways. So as a founder, what you're really looking for is for your head of marketing, your CMO, whatever, whoever it is, right, to be able to stand their ground and not sway necessarily at the random demands of the sales team. And this is one of the huge functions that we bring into every client that we work with. So lastly, the monthly sales and marketing alignment meeting. So we do these at least once a month. Sometimes we'll even do these twice a month, depending on how fast we're growing, where we are reviewing performance versus the targets. We're discussing upcoming tests and changes. We're addressing quality concerns with data. We're planning for capacity and volume changes, and then we're setting targets for the next month. So let's keep rolling here. When sales and marketing clash, so this is very, very common. As I said it earlier in this video, you're going to have moments where the sales team and the marketing team sort of go head to head a little bit. You want that. Now, here's some common conflicts and how we handled them inside the B2C regenerative medicine company. And this is the same process we follow for all of our clients. So if a sales team or sales director goes, hey guys, we need more leads. So the first response is not going to be, okay, cool, we'll increase spend. That's not what you want to do, okay? That's operating on the whims of the sales team. Instead, it's, okay, let's look at the capacity. How much more capacity does the sales team have? How much more potential calendar space is even available? And often the sales team wanted more leads, but actually couldn't handle the volume. And one of the ways we were able to tell this was a mix of both calendar availability and sales ops efficiency. So if we're seeing a lot of gaps and holes on the way leads are actually being stewarded, if you will, or nurtured by the sales team, we're not just going to go, oh, you guys want more leads? Cool, here you go. Here's more spend and more leads. Because if we give you more leads, you're not going to even be able to handle them because you can't even handle the current flow without stuff breaking and tons of qualified leads falling through the cracks. And that, again, only comes through our process of analyzing what's happening on the sales ops side. So you have to be able to go, no, let's fix this first, and then we can do more leads. Oh, if it's like, these leads don't have money. Oh, they're all broke. They're all broke leads. Very, very common sentiment. And then you'll notice with a lot of sales teams and sales directors, the complaints tend to be less data driven and more emotional driven or subjective or qualitative, where it's like the leads are bad or this sucks or whatever it is, not actual like, hey, we've noticed this amount of people out of this amount of people say they have this compared to our normal trend of X. That's a different story. And that's where we look for first, right? So if the sales director says the leads don't have money, we're going to look at the qualification process. We're going to look at the funnel process. We're going to just diagnose the entire system. And often it could be a mix of either a funnel or a process issue on the marketing side, or it could be a sales ops issue again. So sometimes we'll have added better qualification questions and that'll fix it, not changing the media buying. So often it's not necessarily the ads. Sometimes it could be, don't get me wrong, but often if you have proven ads and if you have proven VSL, for example, it could just be more of a funnel process or a sales process issue. Again, it could be a variety of things. It's just what's really important here is the process of diagnosing, not reacting. The ultimate solution, if you're running into an issue between marketing and sales and you're not quite sure what the answer is, just test. Just do a clean 50-50 split test on whatever the issue is, and then get your data and let the data tell you what to do next. So lastly, I want to talk about the systems that kept us sane, daily communication. So morning Slack updates with key metrics, immediate alerts for major changes. So if we're making anything more than a 20% shift in the ad budget, for example, or if we're making a new split test go live or whatever it is, we're giving immediate alerts for those changes. Optional is an end-of-day summary with tomorrow's plan. We didn't always do this because sometimes it can get a little bit redundant because there are going to be periods where you're not actually doing or changing a whole bunch of stuff day to day. But if a big change was coming, then we would definitely do this. Weekly deep dive. So again, performance reviews with the sales directors, call quality analysis, upcoming changes and tests, and planning out for closer and setter capacity. Incredibly important, because if you don't do this, you're just operating the marketing in a vacuum and you're never going to get the level of efficiency and performance that you would if you're operating the marketing relative to the sales and vice versa. Lastly, we do a monthly strategic review where we do a full team meeting. Marketing and sales is on that call, and attribution analysis, and we're looking at the quality of leads and calls from different traffic sources. We're looking at messaging and positioning updates. So based on what people are saying on calls, what are some updates we're going to be potentially making on the marketing side, whether it's new creative tests, new angle tests, maybe it's a new VSL test, whatever the case may be. Might be a new low ticket funnel, whole variety of different things, right? And then lastly, we're going to talk about next month's goals and expectations and how we plan to get there. So I hope you found this video helpful. The relationship between marketing and sales is incredibly crucial and at scale requires constant communication. There's far more that I could go into that I didn't get to in this video, but I wanted to make this as and really give you the meat and potatoes of what you need to know as a founder immediately to gauge the quality of the relationship between your current head of marketing and head of sales. And ultimately on the marketing side, as I said, our job is not just to generate leads, it's to generate the right leads. And the way we do that is by having this intimate relationship with the sales department. Because the truth is, sales teams have insights that can 10x our marketing performance. So if you're a founder right now, if you're still heavily involved in your marketing and you're not constantly communicating with the sales side, then I guarantee you your marketing is suffering as a result and will greatly improve if you start to incorporate insights that you get from the sales teams. But you do have to know how to extract and use those insights. So if you listen to 10 sales calls, don't just listen to them, have AI make a bunch of notes, and then just sit on it and feel good because you got some dopamine out of making a sales call recording analysis. Actually feed that back into the marketing. So I hope you found that video helpful. If you're the founder of a high ticket info business and you're stuck at a couple $100,000 a month and you don't know how to break your current scaling bottlenecks or even what those bottlenecks are, and you want to get clarity on your true marketing and sales performance, then go ahead, pick up the $1 Million a Month KPI dashboard. It's completely free. It's right in the description of this video. It's also as the top pinned comment. Inside that spreadsheet, you're also going to get a growth modeling tool, which is going to allow you to plug in your current marketing and sales numbers and then build you a full projection of what needs to happen inside the business and what your numbers need to look like in order to hit your future revenue targets. So go ahead, pick up the dashboard, be and I'll see you soon.